That is a very good question, Sherry. Such a good question, because a lot of people have that question and they don't feel like there's an answer to it. So, the reason that kind of stuff is unbiblical is because, yes, we have to trust ourselves, but we also have to trust God first. Because all we know is limited to our experience that we have been alive for in time and space right now. We know God's smarter than us because God's outside of time and space, and God can predict the future, and God can do whatever he wants, and he created all of this, and he literally came up with, so we know he is more trustworthy than us. Even if we don't always understand it, we know logically he's smarter than us, even if it's only because he's been alive longer. And it's not about being alive or not, but he's he's had more time to learn things. And so logically, he's smarter than us. And we should trust him and have faith in him. And we also know he's good and loving and he wants our best. So when we go in the Bible and we read, and it tells us not to do witchcraft, not to do divination, not to talk to dead people, not to practice fortune telling, not to practice telling the future, stargazing, astrology. And it says not to practice these things for a couple different reasons. One of them is because God said not to. And that should be the only reason that is needed. But for a lot of people, it's not. So, that being said, God said not to because he wants you to trust him, that he's got a plan. And he wants you to have faith in his plan and not be trying to skirt around what he's trying to teach you. And sometimes he wants to teach you a certain way because he knows you. And he knows you better than you know you. And he knows you better than anyone knows you because he literally created you. And he knows how many hairs are on your head. He knit you together in your mother's womb. He literally knows everything about you. He's seen your whole timeline. He knows he knows it all. And he knows what's best for you. And although we are extremely intelligent and extremely smart and extremely creative, another reason he tells us not to practice those things is because the energy that is helping us, the spirits that are helping us, although they might be presenting as friendly, they are not. And we know they are not because they are not from God. And we know they are not from God because God told us not to do those things. And he told us that those things lead to witchcraft and idolatry and every evil way. And he says that they are taught by demons and that they are taught by fallen angels pretending to be angels of light. And we know that that's true because God said it. Not because anyone else said it, but because God said it. And if God doesn't want you doing it, and God told you why, lack of faith and the teachers of those things are not from him. And so if they're not from him, and we know God's good and love, and they're not from him, so they are not good and they're not loving, that means they're malicious, and that means they're scheming and manipulating and plotting. And they don't have your best or your good in mind. They want you stuck on addiction and repetitious cycles. They want you stuck coming back to them instead of going to God. They want you going to yourself instead of going to God. They want you trusting yourself more than you trust God. And that is illogical. Because we know that compared to God, we don't know nothing. No matter how smart we are, no matter how much we learn, I bet none of us could create anything out of anything. We might have the knowledge, but we don't have the ability because we're not God. And so when God tells us to be obedient, and God tells us that things are dangerous, and he tells us to trust him, and he tells us not to do certain things, we're supposed to obey. And I can tell you stories and examples if you would like more evidence, proof, whatever. And I get that you want to trust yourself, and you should. You should trust your wise mind, your logic mind, the Holy Spirit inside of you, but not yourself. Because we are all sinners. We were born sinners. We make mistakes. We're humans. We have error built in. And yes, God can use our errors for good, but that doesn't mean that he wants us to continue doing it. Just because he can fix it and correct it when we are making errors doesn't mean he doesn't want us to learn from our errors, to learn from our mistakes, and to learn how to stop doing them. And a lot of people get comfortable doing the shortcuts. I know I do. And it's confusing, and it's hard to understand some of these concepts sometimes, and the Bible is really big and long, and people are so judgmental, and most people, like, I can explain it to you more and in depth and in more detail if you like, but that's the basic premise to why those things are unbiblical. I love you. He loves you more.